Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We continue reading Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 12, Birth of Emperor Parikshit, text number 18. Shri Rajovacha Apyesha Vangsyang Rajarsin Punya Shlokam Mahatmana Anuvartita Svitya Shasa Sadhu Vadena Satamaha. Shri Raja, the all-good king, Maharaj Yudhishthira, Uvacha, said, Api, whether, Isha, this, Vangshyan, family, Raja, of kings, Shlok, Naha, all great souls, Anuvartita, follower, sweet, will it be, Yashasa, by achievements, Sadhuvadena, by glorification. The good king Yudhishthira inquired, souls, will he become a saintly king as pious in his very name and as famous and glorified in his achievement? Purport. The forefathers of King Yudhishthira were all great saintly kings, pious and glorified by their great achievements. They were all saints on the royal throne, and therefore all the members of the state were happy, pious, well-behaved, prosperous, and spiritually enlightened. Under strict guidance of the great souls and spiritual injunctions, such great saintly kings were trained up, and as a result the kingdom was full of saintly persons and was a happy land of spiritual life. Maharaj Yudhishthira was himself a replica of his ancestors, and he desired that the next king after him become exactly like his great forefathers. He was happy to learn from the learned brahmanas that by astrological calculations the child would be born a first-grade devotee of the Lord, and more confidentially he wanted to know whether the child was going to follow in the footsteps of his great forefathers. That is the way of the monarchical state. The reigning king should be a pious, chivalrous devotee of the Lord and fear personified for the upstarts. He must also leave an heir apparent equally qualified to rule over the innocent citizens. In the modern setup of the democratic states, the people themselves have fallen to the qualities of the Shudras or less, and the government is run by their representative who is ignorant of the scriptural mode of administrative education. Thus the whole atmosphere is surcharged with Shudra qualities manifested by lust and avarice. Such administrators quarrel every day amongst themselves. The cabinet of ministers changes often due to party and group selfishness. Everyone wants to exploit the state resources till he dies. No one retires from political life unless forced to do so. How can such low-grade men do good to the people? The result is corruption, intrigue, and hypocrisy. They should learn from the Shrimad Bhagavatam how ideal the administrators must be before they can be given charge of different posts. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivendanta Swami Prabhupada Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paskita Deshutarine Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhuve Evacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The verse was, the good king Yudhishthira inquired, O great souls, will he become as saintly a king, as pious in his very name, and as famous and glorified in his achievements as others who appeared in this great royal family. It's interesting that Prabhupada often uses the purports in his books, especially the Bhagavatam, also Chaitanya Charitamrita, but mostly Shrimad Bhagavatam, for preaching a broader mission. The Bhagavatam is meant for your own personal spiritual enlightenment, basically. But it is also a guidance or a guidebook for society at large, how to behave in a Krishna-conscious, or at least in a pious way. And therefore Prabhupada often uses this opportunity in his purports to criticize the current state of affairs and to remind the readers of the greater value of spiritual knowledge, even in a social setting, or in a political setting, or in an economical setting. Well, that we could think now, well, I'm not a politician, I'm not a king, a president, a whatever, administrator, manager. This is not interesting for me. Let's skip to the next page. Let's skip to the next verse. And I think sometimes we catch ourselves reading the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or other holy scriptures in that way that we think, oh, this is not interesting for me. Let me keep reading until something hits me, until I find something that interests me. Have you ever caught yourself reading holy scripture? Never? Wow. Okay. Then I'm the only fallen devotee here. I have to admit, I've caught myself doing this plenty of times, thinking, well, this purport has no relation to my spiritual life, or this verse has no connection to my life, to my reality. This chapter is not very interesting. Demons and demigods fighting in the universe. There's no relevance to me. Description of the different planetary systems. What's the relevance for my spiritual advancement, knowing those kind of things? Never made this experience reading? Okay, all right. Then I might bore you now a little bit as well, so you can skip ahead in your mind. When we catch ourselves reading in that materialistic way, trying to find pleasure and enjoyment, material pleasure and enjoyment, some material entertainment in the Holy Scripture, we should remind us of the very purpose of why we are studying the Holy Scripture. Like with everything else that we do in spiritual life, it is very, very important, maybe most important even, to have a very clear goal of what you want to achieve with what you're doing. If we just mindlessly chant our rounds every day, if we just mindlessly attend the programs in the temple, without wanting to achieve a certain goal, then our spiritual practice is not very well directed, it's not very focused, and also will not achieve great results. When we practice spirituality or Krishna consciousness without a clear focus in mind, our endeavor is not very focused, not very well directed towards that goal. So therefore, before we chant, we should think, why do I chant now? What do I want from chanting? Is it a certain need for companionship of Krishna? Is it a desire to praise Krishna? A desire to serve Krishna? Is it a need for shelter that I get from association with the holy name? When we go to the temple, what is our focus? What is our aim? What is our goal? In Sanskrit this is called sankalpa. Like before you do a sacrifice, a fire sacrifice, usually in kalpa ceremony, where you declare what is my goal that I want to achieve with doing this. Who do I want to worship and why do I want to worship that person? So also when we come in front of the deity, we should think, why am I here? What do I want? We might think, well, this is very selfish. We should be not wanting anything, right? Pure devotional service. In pure devotional service, we do not want anything. But the nature of the soul is to always want something. It's the very nature of the soul to have this. But because as beginners in spiritual life, we identify desires with material desires. We think that any kind of desire must be a material desire because that's the only kind of desire that we know and that we have experience of. We think that desire itself is a bad thing. But desire in itself is not a bad thing. The desire to serve Krishna is the best of desires. The desire to serve the Vaishnavas is the best of desires. The desire to taste the prasad of the Lord is the best of desires. But those are all desires. And there's nothing wrong in wanting these things. So when we come in front of the deity, when we chant the holy name, and when we read the holy scripture, we should have a very clear desire in mind. What do I want? Why am I doing this? What is my sankalpa? What is my goal? And when we have that, then we start to practice our spiritual routine with a different mindset. In a mentality of service. Because as devotees we know that what we should want, at least, is to serve Krishna. And sometimes this pure desire of wanting to serve Krishna is mixed with other kinds of desires. Desire for shelter, for harmony, for all kinds of things. But that is not bad. That's just realism. That's just where we are. But just trying to serve Krishna with whatever ability, with whatever level of spiritual advancement we have, will purify these desires as well. So they slowly become more and more pure until we come to the stage where we do what we want out of a pure desire to serve. And until then, we do it with mixed desires. But better do it and be clear of what we're doing than not doing it at all, or doing it mindlessly, not knowing what we're doing. So when we're reading the Bhagavatam and we come across passages where we think, well, this is not relevant to me, then we can remind ourselves of the sankalpa, of the goal that we meditated about before we opened the book. So therefore this is very helpful. Why do I want to read Shrimad Bhagavatam? I want to find out about Krishna and about his devotees. Might be one motivation. I want to learn something. I want to discover Krishna in these pages. I want to sharpen my view of the world with spiritual eyes. I want to develop a spiritual vision of the world. Might be another. Some might have a very academic sankalpa. I want to really understand the philosophy. Whatever your mood is, your mentality is, or your current state of desire and service to Krishna is, we can read the Holy Scripture with that sankalpa, with that motivation. And then we are ready in our hearts and in our minds for Krishna to appear in these pages. And that is the unique thing. If we read the Shrimad Bhagavatam as an ordinary book, it will be an ordinary book to us. That's why materialistic scholars, they can read this Bhagavatam and they can study it, they can analyze it, they can count the words in it, whatever they do. But they will not become inspired to serve Krishna by reading it, usually. Because the Bhagavatam hides itself behind these pages made of paper and behind these words made of ink. The true Bhagavatam, what? Anybody has an idea what the Bhagavatam is? What is the Bhagavatam actually?
Literatical incarnation.
Exactly, it's an incarnation, it's the literary incarnation of Krishna. It is Krishna. It's described that the different cantos of the Bhagavatam are the different parts of Krishna's body. So when I'm holding this, what am I holding? A bunch of paper and ink? No, I'm holding one of Krishna's feet. The first canto is like Krishna's feet. So I can touch Krishna's feet with my hand when I'm reading it. I can touch Krishna's feet with my mind when I'm studying it. I can meditate on Krishna's feet when I'm using my intelligence to understand what Krishna is telling me here. So the Bhagavatam reveals itself to the reader who has the right mindset. Krishna reveals himself in the pages of the Bhagavatam to the person who has the right motivation of reading the Bhagavatam. And therefore, if we catch ourselves reading with a materialistic mentality that, oh, this is not entertaining, this is not interesting, I already know that, I've read this already so many times, I've heard that, oh, the purport is so long, let's just skip to the next verse. All kinds of things we might encounter our mind thinking of while reading. We can think, oh no, let's pull back. Let's step back a second. This is not a book that I have to finish in 3 weeks. I can read this my entire life. It's no rush. I can take time. Let's take a step back and bring my focus back. I want to find Krishna here. Or whatever your focus is. And then you will start to see that while reading these things that on an external level might not have much relevance to your current spiritual practice or to the current problems you face in your spiritual life, actually give you great inspiration. Because Krishna is revealing himself in this. When I met the devotees, one devotee told me, one should always read the verse and the purport, and then read it again. But the second time you're reading, with the thought, what is this giving me in my spiritual life? Because the first impetus of the mind is to just gather information, right? We just want to know stuff. So usually when we start reading, we just want to know what's going on, what's happening here. Try to figure it out, try to understand it. But if we then just go to the next verse, we keep reading with that mentality. So we gather a lot of information, but we're not really opening our hearts to what's on the page. So it's good to read it again and then really think, okay, Krishna, what do you try to tell me here? What relevance does this have for my Krishna consciousness? And therefore it is amazing that we can read the same passage in the Holy Scriptures again and again, and every time find new inspiration in it. What other book can do that? I'm sure all of us have or had some favorite authors in our life. Some people that we like to read. But have you tried to read the same book 5, 6, 10 times? I have some favorite books that I read maybe 2 or 3 times. But at least at the third time I was like, okay, not again. This was enough. And I don't know how many times I've read the same verses and purports in the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam. And it's every time something fresh, something new. Do you have this experience? This is because the Holy Scriptures are no ordinary books. They are not just a source of external information, they are a source of internal inspiration. But we need to have the proper eyes and the proper mindset in reading the Bhagavatam. I'm saying all that because I'm struggling today, to be honest, with understanding or with coming to this point where this verse and this purpose inspire something in me for my own spiritual progress right now at this very moment. Yes, I completely agree with what Prabhupada says. The current state of political affairs is just as bad or worse than at the time when he wrote this in the early 60s. That's what now? 60 years ago. Prabhupada wrote this 60 years ago while staying in India, having an Indian or maybe even global politics, or at least Indian politics. But what he wrote here is applicable all over the world at the current time as well. And it was so 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and will probably be so for hundreds of years to come. That's because Prabhupada is not just writing an op-ed in a newspaper here. He is being guided by Krishna in his heart to write these things, to leave guidelines for the world to come, to open their eyes to the spiritual reality of things. That even in management and leadership and politics, a spiritual perspective, a spiritual dimension is required for people to be happy and healthy, to be prosperous, to just do well materially, like we talked about a few weeks ago. The Bhagavatam teaches even just to do well in life, to be materially happy, to come to a sattvic platform of existence. But as Prabhupada says here, that is only possible if the rulers themselves are advanced, spiritually advanced, and therefore also materially advanced, not in the sense that they are very rich or very beautiful or very famous, but materially advanced in the sense of knowledge, of character, sense of morality and so on. And that they're also guided by people who are not after power. That's the classic system, that you have the managers being guided by the Brahmins who don't care about position, about wealth, about fame, who just for the good of the people guide their king, their leader, their president, their manager in what's right and what's wrong. And the king being qualified enough to take advice. We have enough examples in history, but the king had lots of advisors. But often kings were so arrogant that they did not take that advice. And then when advice was not in line with their own thoughts, those advisors would have to go one way or another. So those advisors just turned into a group of yes men, who just, oh yes, my dear king, wonderful idea, very good. Thinking, my God, what an idiot, but yes, very good, very well done, just to save their own necks. So qualification has to be there on all kinds of levels. And Prabhupada said that the Bhagavatam should be the guideline for even the current state of affairs and political life. He encouraged people, he encouraged devotees to approach politicians and give them Bhagavad Gita, give them the Bhagavatam in the hopes that they will become enlightened, that they understand that they have to qualify themselves more in order to be properly qualified to lead. So, thinking about what this could mean for our own personal spiritual experience, our own Krishna conscious experience, is that, for example, we should take the Bhagavatam seriously on all kinds of levels. That we should not think, oh, materially, I can just do whatever I want. Sense of morality, not important. Material qualifications, not important. I just should chant. That's all. But then our circle of influence in life might become very small. Prabhupada encourages the readers of his books to use their circle of influence and to widen their circle of influence. That's what the preaching movement means. Preaching means to go out to approach people. That means we are widening our circle of influence gradually. He wanted all of his followers to become gurus. A guru is a person with a very large circle of influence. Lots of people come and want to hear from him. Guru is not somebody who climbs and says, listen. The guru usually is very humble, but people come to him, and therefore his circle of influence is very large, because he does not have to propagate himself. But how can we become such people who have a large circle of influence, where people come and want to hear, want to take advice from us, want to see our example? Only if we, besides being very spiritually qualified, there's also some material qualifications that follow the spiritual qualifications. As Prabhupada always says, you can be the best person if you just have a bunch of zeros. But if you add Krishna to it, it becomes a very large number. So Krishna is always the most important, but we can enhance our own experience and our own ability to reach out to others, our own ability to leave a positive influence in this world, in one way or another, by qualifying ourselves, by learning things. That's one of the things we can hear, to elevate ourselves from, as Prabhupada says here, Shudra qualities, because that's one thing that we are all born into. We are born into a world, as Prabhupada says here, that is ruled by the influence of Shudra qualities. Often as beginners in spiritual life we think, oh yeah, Shudras are all bad. They're all worthless. We should all be Brahmins, they're the best. The best and the worst. That's the material duality that we are used to, isn't it? If one is the best, then another one has to be the worst. How can there be a best and another best and another best? But the Vedic system teaches us that in order for the balance to be there in life, everybody has to be equally qualified in their position, equally respected by each other, but fulfill very specific functions. And therefore, just because one is doing something different than someone else does not mean that somebody is better or worse than someone else. But if there is no balance, if there is only one type of influence in a society is falling apart. So Shudra qualities means that the Shudra usually does not have the larger spiritual vision, does not usually have a deeper sense of right and wrong, and often does not have a very well-established education. The Shudra is that part in society that needs leadership by someone else. And the other groups of society need the Shudra to support the work that needs to be done. So therefore, when Prabhupada says that the atmosphere is surcharged with Shudra qualities, it is this rudderless ship, this leaderless society, where when it's like a small child, when you don't guide a small child and what is good and what is bad, they just do whatever comes to their mind. So if you have a room full of small children without any supervision, eventually the room will be quite chaotic. Because small children don't have this long-term perspective, or maybe we should clean up, or maybe we shouldn't break this, or maybe one shouldn't play with that, maybe this will be harmful. They just do whatever comes to their head right now. So in the same way, a society that is headless, so to speak, because it does not have the qualified leadership, spiritually and materially qualified leadership, is like a society full of small, unguided children, where everybody just thinks of themselves and thinks of their own immediate satisfaction. And that's what we see nowadays. It is slowly changing a little bit. We see this with the Green Movement that appeared in the 80s. People started to take a little more long-term perspective, thinking, oh, we should regulate ourselves, should cut back on enjoyment. Right now in the Corona crisis, those voices are coming up again. Oh, this is the time to cut back on rampant consumerism. Aggressive capitalism is not the solution. It's not working. So there is a voice there, but it's not the voice in charge. The voice in charge is, I want fun. I want to enjoy. We need growth. The annual economical growth rate is still the most important number that national economies and global economies worry about, isn't it? So it is still this more, I need more, I want this. I want to have this car, so how can I get it? I want to enjoy this, so how can I get it? So this is the state we are in still at the moment, and that's also the kind of society that we appeared in. So we are naturally surcharged also with this kind of mentality, with these qualities. But that does not mean that we don't have an opportunity to serve Krishna, that we do not have an opportunity to elevate ourselves to a mode of goodness type of lifestyle. And that's another thing that Krishna and Prabhupada is teaching us. That by the right association, by the right activities, our mindset is changing. And by our mindset changing, our desires are changing. And therefore our life is changing. It's very interesting. In Vedic psychology, changing your life is a two-way street. You can start with your desires. I change my desires, therefore I change my thinking, therefore I change my acting. But that's a very difficult and advanced state, because you really have to swim against the stream. Everything around you is pushing in one direction, you say, no, I want something else. Many of us, I think, have this experience when we met the devotees and we began our Krishna conscious journey. That's what we did. We just forced ourselves to be different. No, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. No, I'm not taking drugs anymore. No, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm doing something else now. Isn't it? Anyone had this experience? Like you force yourself to change direction, drastically sometimes. But to do this for a long time is quite difficult, especially when it gets more subtle and more subtle. So the other approach Vedic psychology gives us is to change from the other end of the equation. You change your activity, therefore you change your thinking gradually, because what you do leaves sanskaras in your mind. You do the same thing over and over and over again. It becomes natural, therefore your thinking also works in the same mode. And when you start acting and thinking in a certain way for long enough time, also your desires follow this kind of acting and thinking. And this is what sadhana bhakti is. We're just acting and acting and acting as if we are pure devotees of Krishna. We're acting devotees. We cook for Krishna, we serve Krishna, we talk about Krishna. All those things are going on in the spiritual world. Our desires might not be there yet. We might not fully want it yet. Or we might not be in a state where we don't want anything else yet. And our thinking might not be there yet either, fully. We might still think about other things. But we are acting it. And by acting it sincerely enough and long enough, our thinking will follow suit. We create sanskaras in our mind. This is the right way to behave. So then at some point we will think, oh yes, this is the right thing to do. Doing it and by thinking it, also at some point our desires will change direction from selfishness to selflessness, from egocentrism to Krishna-centrism. And this is an opportunity that every conditioned soul has, no matter under what circumstances the soul appeared in this world. So even though we might take birth in a society or in a situation surcharged with Shudra atmosphere, we can elevate ourselves from that with the help of the holy name and the spiritual master and the Shrimad Bhagavatam. And that's why we're here. Do you have any questions or comments? Doubts?
I don't know. Thank you for your lecture. I don't know if you have been talking about it, but I really can't understand how. You were a little bit talking about this. How Shudra can be a spiritual, like, they have certain qualities. Like, we know all these qualities because we have them, and I really don't. I can't understand a Shudra in a spiritual governal system, and I can understand how brahmanas can take the leadership when they don't really have the interest, like they are not ambitious, but kshatras are. So how can this be? I really don't understand the mechanisms or what.
You mean the mechanisms when they are combined with Krishna consciousness, or the mechanisms by themselves?
I can understand this in Krishna consciousness.
Okay.
Consciousness even. So.
Okay. You see, we all have our natures, and of course nowadays in Kali Yuga we understand that no one has the pure Brahmana mentality or the pure mentality. We all have a great mix of influences. So therefore, all of us, we have different aspects to our personality that are more Shudra-like, but then at the same time we might be a little Brahminical in some ways, or we might enjoy some things that are typically Vaishya associated. So for us it's a little hard to understand for ourselves, but in a general sense, as archetypes or stereotypes, we can understand that those four mentalities are there. And even in Krishna consciousness, a Krishna conscious Shudra, he is doing his work, he is doing his job, his work, but he's doing that for Krishna. And he's using the time he has to serve Krishna. In the Vaishya, he's making business, and maybe the business can be connected to Krishna, but otherwise he is the one accumulating wealth, so he's donating for Krishna and for a Krishna conscious purpose in society. And the Kshatriya, he is managing, he is ruling, he is policing to protect people and to organize society in a way so that people can be happy in Krishna consciousness and be prosperous, well-behaved, happy, pious. Doesn't mean be devotee, this is not realistic in Kali Yuga in this material world, but at least be well-behaved, happy, doing okay. Nobody having to live on the street. A welfare system to be there on. And the Brahmana, he's with the mentality of serving Krishna, guiding the rest of society by helping people understand exactly all these things. How to be healthy, how to be happy, how to be prosperous, how to be Krishna conscious. You see, how is it for us? I mean, the same thing is true for us. When we go to work, who do we work for? Our boss, right? Or ourselves. Because I want to earn money, so I can have things. But we could do the exact same work for Krishna. We can do what we do. We can work in a kindergarten, or in an office, or in a lab, or wherever we are. We can do this work, this very same specific work for Krishna. How? How is that possible? It's just a question of mentality, of motivation. When Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that everyone serves me in every regard, what does he mean by that? That everybody runs to the temple and offers obeisances and brings a flower? No. Krishna is present in this world in so many different forms. And everybody is serving Krishna in one of those forms. Even the ones who really not serving Krishna consciously. They're still serving Krishna. So what to speak of us who are conscious of Krishna, who want to serve Krishna. So therefore, understanding that we have a material body with material needs, that we have obligations in this world. We are fulfilling these duties, but with a higher sense, with a sense that I'm maintaining this body so I can serve Krishna. And in order to maintain this body, I need shelter, I need food and clothing, I need health insurance. How do I get these things? How do I get work? And therefore, my work is Krishna conscious. I might not think of Krishna every second while I'm at the office writing emails, taking phone calls, doing whatever I'm doing at work. But because I have this sankalpa, I have this motivation, I want to serve Krishna. And that's what I really want to do. But in order to be able to serve Krishna, I need some things in this life. I'm not on the level of a yogi who can just, run around naked and just get this energy from sunlight and prana and just, it's not who I am. I need certain things in order to be able to serve Krishna. So I get these things that I need. But I don't take more than what I need, and I don't struggle too hard for things that are not realistic for me to have, not wasting my time on those either. So I'm fulfilling my duty in this world so I can serve Krishna. And therefore this is also part of serving Krishna. So the Shudra is doing the Gita and Krishna consciousness is just doing that, just like any other Vaishya, Kshatriya or Brahman. They all fulfill their external material duties but with a higher understanding, with a higher sense, and therefore these things become part of their Krishna consciousness. And of course, if you think now within the society of devotees, how can there be Shudras? Of course there are Shudras. Who do you think is building our temples? Who is maintaining our temples? Who is fixing our Sankirtan bands? All people with Shudra qualities, because a Brahman would not know how to put a nail in a wall. He would hit a stump 100 times before he would hit the nail. He can give you the mechanics, the physical mechanics maybe of how the nail goes into the wall, give a lecture about that, but he won't be able to do it. So, and what's wrong with that? Anybody thinks, when we come here and paint the temple and fix the temple, is that something bad? Just because it's a Shudra activity, it's a physical, practical activity? No, it's a service to Krishna. When we manage this temple, is this something bad? No, it's also service to Krishna. When we earn money for the association of the devotees, for the service of Krishna, is this something bad? No. So, no matter where we are, as long as we add Krishna to it, if our focus, if our sankalpa, if our motivation is, we spiritualize everything else connected to it. If we keep that focus, when we forget that focus, when the influence of the material energy takes us back and makes us believe, I'm doing this for myself because I want this, I want that. I want the recognition, I want the money, I want the car, I want the enjoyment, I want whatever. Then the same activity becomes material again. So it's not about the activity, it's about the mentality.
I think that was my problem. I couldn't really imagine that Shudras could be like Krishna conscious because they are associated with bad qualities.
Yeah, bad qualities, sure. But then those are the Shudras that are unguided, If we think about the work ethic of, how to say this in English, the Handwerker, the craftsmen. Craftsmen have a very strong work ethic. They have a very strong sense of perfection in what they're doing. This is the ideal mentality of a Shudra. They take pride in their work. They are very precise in what they're doing. They want to create long-lasting things. How are those bad qualities? Those are good qualities. So if you encourage this, but if a society does not encourage this, if a society just encourages whatever, just do whatever, just make a quick buck, because nobody values your work anyway. You're not valuable, your work is not valuable. Then those good qualities, they disappear, and what is the vacuum filled with? The not so nice qualities. And that's interesting. All those four parts of society, they also, every other part also has bad qualities. The Vaishya, when he's not focusing on sattvic way of dealing, greed takes over. Money, money, money. And they start to cheat and to steal. When a Kshatriya is not acting properly or is not guided properly, what are his bad qualities? Arrogance, aggression, violence. Violence, he might use violence in a good way, but otherwise a violent behavior, a disturbance to society. A policeman who beats down on peaceful demonstrators without being ordered so even. So the negative qualities of a Kshatriya. And also Brahmanas have negative qualities. Arrogance. Also arrogance. Puffed up. Or being completely aloof from this world, having no sense of connection to this world, therefore having no positive influence on this world. So we are still in the material world. When we talk about these things, there's always this duality. But what happens when these four parts of society work together according to the laws that Krishna set up, or the system that Krishna set up, and then on top of it, with a spiritual perspective, the good qualities come into the foreground. The good qualities arise, and the bad qualities are kept in check. But we can't imagine this because we don't see this anywhere. We don't have a current, and we don't have an historical experience of a functioning society. We always think, oh, this is such an Indian thing, such an East Asian thing, those clear divisions in society. But just look at European history from the last 200-300 years. Exactly the same thing. Europe has a caste system. America has a caste system, maybe based on little different values, but the same division is there. Glossed over maybe a little bit by some more familiar culture, or by a little more politeness. Here in the West, we are very good at covering things up. How often do you see disabled people on the street? How often do you see a dying animal on the street? Never. Asia, it's every day. So the same is true for other things. We are very good at covering things up, putting things under the carpet. But the same principles are still there. Sociologists, they figured that, okay, we do not have a class society anymore. No more 3 classes. We don't even have a caste society. It's a little bit more divided. They say it's around 7 to 8 groups we have in society nowadays that are very distinct and that are difficult to cross over from one into another. But the same principle is there. Yeah. Focus, that is what makes the difference. I don't think a Krishna-conscious Shudra is any less happy than a Krishna-conscious Brahmin. Because he's fulfilling his duty and he's doing it in Krishna consciousness. All right, thank you. Maybe one more question? Yeah, what?
Yeah, I have one more question. We don't talk about Chaitanya making this example, given this example of the mirror, and by purifying ourselves, we are cleaning the mirror. So I don't really understand what is the symbol of the mirror. Does it mean?
The mirror is symbolizing the mind.
Okay.
And why is the mirror so important? Because the mirror, in its perfect state, is giving a perfect reflection. Right? When the mirror is dirty, the reflection becomes hazy. You don't really see so clearly anymore. Or when a mirror is completely dirty, then you don't see anything anymore. It's just like a mud surface, no reflection at all. So what do we want the reflection of in our mind? Why is it so important to have a mind that is able to reflect? What do we want to be reflected in our mind, right? That's Krishna. We want Krishna's reflection in our mind. We want to reflect Krishna. Prabhupada compares us to a spark, to a little flame, and Krishna is the fire. So we are, or Prabhupada says that he speaks of the devotee as this very technical term, the via medium. Krishna is appearing through the devotee. But Krishna can only appear fully through the devotee when the devotee is pure in his heart and in his mind. Otherwise there are filters, there are lenses, there are coverings, and Krishna does not fully appear through the devotee. So therefore, when we cleanse this mirror, Krishna can reflect fully through us. That's what a pure devotee is. He's reflecting Krishna in all his glory, in all his qualities, in all his beauty. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. On Wednesday we have Janmashtami, and since you're all here, I would like to invite all of you to come. And I would also like to let you know how we are trying to have things worked out this year. Due to Corona regulations, we are only allowed to have 15 people in this room at any time, because you have to divide the amount of square meters in a room by 1.5, and then you know how many people are in there. Because you have to legally have distance to each other, which we are not very good at keeping usually. We have space which we are not using, but we are a public space here, so we have to try to follow the regulations. So 15 people are allowed in this room at any given time, but we also know that especially on Janmashtami many devotees like to come to the temple and take darshan and offer their obeisances and stay for a little while. So what we will do is we will have a small group of devotees who do kirtan and who worship Lord Jagannath, and everybody is welcome. We start at 5 p.m. We'll continue until around 10 o'clock. Anyone is welcome to come, and as long as there are not too many people stay, as long as you like, fine. Building in front of the temple, we will ask devotees to please leave, so that other devotees have a chance to come and attend as well. So be prepared mentally that you might not be able to stay for the whole program. But I would like to request you to leave when asked, so that other devotees have a chance to attend as well. Even when there's if there should be a huge crowd and a line down to the park, everybody will have a chance at least to stay for some time and pray and take some prasad. But just I would like to ask your cooperation in case it becomes very full. Maybe it will not happen. Maybe the devotees and then if you come, all the better. You can just stay as long as you like. But if it becomes very full, then I would be happy if you can cooperate and give other devotees a chance to attend as well. All right. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.